I want to refer to a survey conducted by Comm Communications Company. They are a PR consulting firm based in Boston, USA. They conducted an online survey with over 1,000 American millennials and Gen Z to find out what they want in their employment, in their work. And 76% of millennials in the US consider an organization's social and environmental commitments when deciding where to work. Listen to that. They decide based on environmental commitments of the organization. 64% of millennials in the US won't take the job, will not take the job at all if the job or if the company doesn't have strong corporate social responsibility values. The findings here, you might think that it's a little bit dated, it's 2016, but I would argue that it's getting even more important today because those millennial and Gen Z, they're moving up to the mid-level or maybe high-level executives already. If they bring that value is being more and more reinforced at this point. I'm not saying that which one is better, the older generation or the younger generation here. You can see that there's a change in the values among all different generations here. What do you think people in my generation value? I'm from Gen X. You don't have to guess my age now, but I'm from Gen X here, right? What do you think Gen X would value? Success in career, right? The clear career path. Because when I get a job offer, my parents would ask me to consider which job would allow me to climb up the ladder, to be more successful, and to excel myself in the way I am. I'm not saying that that's a bad value or this is a good value, but you see the change in the value here among different generations will require different communications from the organization to retain those talents. I want to draw your attention to one of the classic studies in management called the Hawthorne study, not Hawthorne here in Melbourne, but here is the Hawthorne, the factory, the electric factory in Chicago. This study is a classic study and it happened in 1920. I want to mention this name, Elton, E-L-T-O-N, Mayo, like mayonnaise Mayo, M-A-Y-O. Elton Mayo is one of the classic organizational management scholars. Originally, Elton Mayo conducted his experiment in Hawthorne to test his hypothesis because he thinks that, or he questioned whether or not the physical environment has any effects on workers' productivity. Like let's say, if you change the ventilation, the lighting in the room, would that make people or workers become more productive in their work lives? Would they produce more light bulbs and blah, blah, blah? So he set up an experiment, set up so many rooms for workers, some room with good lighting, the other room with not so good lighting, some room with good ventilation, some room with like the stuffy atmosphere. You know what he found? Do you think there's a difference between the condition, the physical condition? He found that the physical condition has very, very minimal effects on worker productivities until he cannot conclude that it has a significant effect at all. Then he continued observing workers' productivity. But you know what he found out in the end? He found out that worker interactions will lead to workers' productivity. It's not the physical setting. If the workers have a chance to take a break, talk to each other, work as a team, smile at each other, happy in the workplace, that will lead to productivity. That's why this study, even though it's very dated through the observation here, it becomes a classic story that all the management people share. And I think it relates to our PR work as well. It's not about the physical settings, but it's more of the happy interactions that people have, the good culture in the workplace that make people become more productive. Throughout my lecture today, I want to emphasize, and this part is very important, related to your assessment, ladies and gentlemen. You will participate in the interactive oral assessment where you are asked to provide your arguments, to persuade, to debate on a topic. But one of the key requirements is that you have to use some data from empirical research to support your argument. And I want you to pause and think about my lecture today. I demonstrated that in a couple of moments in this lecture. Do you remember when I talk about the employee survey by Comm Communication in the US, in Boston? I emphasize and summarize the survey findings to you and point out the findings that support my argument that the younger generations care more about the social value here. So that's why we need to pay attention to employee communication. And I refer to some statistics from the findings. That's what we want you to do. And that's what I mean by empirical studies. You have to go find relevant empirical research. This one, empirical research, is a survey conducted by that company. The second moment that I want you to reflect and think about is the moment when I refer to Elton Mayo's Hawthorne effect. That's also an empirical study, right? Even though the findings is the bypass finding, not the actual direct findings that the physical environments do not affect the productivity. That's the direct findings, but that findings doesn't matter. The indirect effects matter more. Human interactions. I use the findings from that experiment to support my argument that, hey, we have to pay attention to employees' happiness. And that's what I want to see in your presentation, in your interactive oral assessment, to go find reliable empirical studies. And by empirical studies, I mean studies that collect data firsthand through survey, through observation, through experiment, or even through interview. So right now, start thinking about the empirical studies where you can go find them and how to report that, incorporate that findings into your presentation. My suggestion is this. When you present these empirical studies, you don't have to explain everything about the study because the study could be 10 pages and you have only 3 minutes to report that. Talk about number one, what is or what are the objectives of the study? What questions the person or the company or the organization, the researchers want to answer? In the Hawthorne effect, Elton Mayo want to find out whether or not physical environment has any effects on productivity. That's number one, right? Talk about the question, the objectives of the study. Number two, talk about how the study was conducted just briefly. An online survey was conducted and about 1,000 people replied. That's good enough. Elton Mayo observed the workers in the factories throughout this time, during this period. That's good enough. And number three, key findings relevant to your speech. You don't have to report every single piece of findings from the study, just pick the ones that are relevant to your speech. That is a very good skill to have, not just for public relations work, because in the future you may want to or may have to convince people through some data, through some research, but it's the general academic skills that you need to develop as well. So from now on, whatever empirical studies that you read, I want you to think of the three questions. What is the objective of the study? How is the study conducted? What are the key findings?